So our first speaker is Miranda Harcourt, and Miranda and her mother, Kate Harcourt, have done an amazing program at Arahara Prison where they're getting women who are there to actually start to learn how to write stories, and those stories are then published, and then the stories are sent home to their children. And they're also videoing the women reading their stories to their children. Quite an amazing, passionate story. The other speakers I have are Alan Watson, who is a man from Invercargill. 30 years ago or so he established and invented a way of lifting oil tanks from the ground and repairing damage on the water tanks. He has lifted over 3,000 tanks around the world, and his focus is his area of expertise around lifting tanks out and sealing them off to stop the water. Because the problem we have with water in third world countries is that it's been infiltrated with oils and diesels and contaminants. And his way of actually addressing that is by lifting the tanks and cleaning the tanks underneath and resealing them. Again, a name we don't know in New Zealand. He's worked internationally all over the world. We have Suzanne Snively, who's going to talk about from Transparency International, who will talk about the Corruption Index, which has been recently released. In the next few days it will come out again, and it has indicated over the years that New Zealand is either the top or the second top least corrupt country in the world. Interesting to think about what happens as a result of dirty politics. Will that influence when they do the survey this year, will influence people's thinking about what is New Zealand's position and level of corruption. Is there a level of corruption that's starting to come through and be measured in that index? So that'd be a spectacular release. John Thorne is a member of the Rotary Action Group for Food and helping local economies. And he and his fellows have been doing some really good work in the area of finding seeds and plants that may have been disappeared thousands of years ago, and they've been rediscovered, and they're helping them grow food in places where food has never grown before, in deserts. Part of Africa which doesn't have much rainfall at all. There are now foods feeding populations of people who haven't had the chance to have food, quality food. The area of interesting will be the work has been done in Tanzania. Over many years, Rotary has had a program called Heifers for Africa, where farmers donated heifers, and they were sent across to Africa to small villages in Tanzania to try to help the most impoverished people to actually establish some industry and some food and milk. Those heifers and the programs that have been going on ever since have now developed into herds. And in parts of Tanzania now, they've got enough sufficient herds and villages to actually create processing. So in recent years, Jeff and his fellows have been working there helping establish dairy processing plants, and not only helping them develop them, but also training local populations so they can now manage them. So from very impoverished villages in Tanzania, we now have local economies growing, people are being employed, new skills being developed. One of the most interesting speakers will be our own Sarah Agnew, who comes from Wellington, who is a Rotary Fellow, Peace Fellow, who has been working in Cambodia on the war crimes for the Khmer Rouge. And one of the investigators there, she is now working in out of Africa, investigating similar war crimes in Rwanda and other places. She's flying back from Abu Dhabi to actually then get to us and then go back to continue her work in the war crimes. Quite an amazing young woman. Comes from Wellington, and one of our Peace Scholars that we have helped now a Peace Fellow. We have some very interesting speakers in relation to generational change. Linda Moore is one of the most sought after speakers around the world. We'll talk about the impact of generational change happening in our societies. In Australia, for example, there are 5.5 million generation baby boomers, and they've been replaced by Generation X, which is about 4 million. So we're going to have a gap in our society of those who volunteer to help, and her discussion is really around how we actually address that from a Rotary point of view. She'll be joined by Brooke Turner, who's a young entrepreneur who's done the most amazing things in helping young people with artistic ideas create industry. Rotary has had a focus on health as one of the areas of focus for many years, and most well known is the focus on polio eradication. Virtually we have eradicated the world of disease over the last 30 years, a disease which has crippled so many people around the world. The outcome now, of course, is people who have survived polio are now suffering what we call post-polio symptoms and syndrome. and we will have Jeanette Aldridge, who is one of those. Only a few years ago was a very active woman and now confined to a wheelchair. And this is, they're estimating there are 10 million people like her around the world who are going to suffer the impacts or the effects of polio. The other speaker we're going to have in relation to health is Dr. Sweet Han, who's one of the most well-known world plastic surgeons, who has devoted his time in eradicating birthmarks. And Dr. Sweet Han has done some incredible work helping Rotary in people who can't afford to have operations through the Pacific Islands in particular, through a program we call ROMAC, Rotary Overseas Medical Aid Group Corps, and these are medical professionals around the world and helping people who have been disfigured for whatever reason it is. Sweet Han has been one of the big surgeons around the world who's done a lot of work in that area.